So what I was saying at the end of the last video is that essentially these boxes are just going to be to help me get these images in place, and then before I print I'll look down here and I'll say, oh, there's a layer that says no print, turn that off, and then I'll have everything that I need here, the wire diagram, the typography to align my images and make everything or I mean to enhance my images and make them look good. Now, if you had a page that was really long in your website, let's say like you just had a single scrolling page portfolio, this is a technique that you may or may not be interested in. Let's just pretend that this is a portfolio page and that it's not horrifically stretched. So in other words, what you have to imagine here is that like this is one portfolio, a little bit of write-up on it, another portfolio piece, little write-up, and it goes on and on and on. Sometimes you want a way to be able to show that, which could be just simply like a breaking line in there. So that could be as simple as taking the pen tool. Really doesn't matter what it's set to at first. In fact, my preference for drawing with the pen tool is always to draw with just a stroke on it. Now, since this is close to black in color, I may want to click on the stroke and either with the swatches or this thing, or even double clicking in here, just pick a much lighter color that contrasts to black and also shows up against white, and maybe do something like that kind of rip effect. And I'd probably take my time and make this a little more accurate, but I'm just going to speed up here so you get the idea. And then we'll cover this whole bottom section, go back to where we started, which is called closing the path. And then once we have that completed, then we can flip-flop the fill and the stroke, bring the fill forward and pick white for it. And then, now obviously that's not overly professional looking, but you get the idea. If you took your time and did that, you could give that effect like you're telling the audience that this goes on and on forever. Another thing that you might encounter is maybe in your case, it makes sense for, rather than the white of the page, maybe you need a color to show, like maybe because your background of your browser is important to the overall design of your website, or maybe yours just shows up better against black. So two things to keep in mind there. One is that you will not be able to print all the way to the edge of the pages. You'll generally lose about 1/4 of an inch on each side, and the top and the bottom. And if you want to find out what that amount is exactly, rather than just saying it's about 1/4 of an inch, if you're on a computer that is connected to the printer that you'll be using, they talk to each other, and you can do this. You can go to File, Print, set up the page size that you'll be using. So on the computers in the classrooms that use 13 by 19, I believe it's called Super A3, so you'd pick that from the list. In my case, it doesn't exist on this particular computer printer combination that I have, so I'll just pick Tabloid just to show you what I want you to see if you're trying this on another computer. So the main thing is you just set up the printer size that you want to use, and then instead of clicking print or cancel, you want to click done. So now the program knows what size paper it's going to print on, and then you just go up to view and you select show print tiling, and then it shows this little dotted box around here that represents, and it would be this inside box that represents this is the area that will not show up if we print. In this case, that does no good because it's too small, so I'll go ahead and hide that. So until you actually have a chance to sit down on the computer that you'll be using to print on, what you can do in the meantime is just create your background layer. And I'll just pick like a medium grayish color just so you can see what's actually happening here. Now you have to give a little thought to the layers here. Essentially what you're going to want to do is have that be the very bottom layer. So what I'll do is I'll create a new layer. I'll click on the very bottom layer. I'll click on the new layer icon. I get this new layer. I'll click and drag it all the way to the bottom. I'll double click on it to name it, something like BG for background, and then I'll lock the other layers just to make sure that this is the only layer I can do something on right now. I will select my medium gray color Maybe in this case it might actually be better to use the swatches. Okay, let's just use that color there. And then what we'll do is we'll take the rectangle tool, we'll click just anywhere here, and then we'll enter the size of that box. So let's just assume that it is exactly 1/4 of an inch that we'll be losing. So our width in this case would be 19 minus 1/4 and 1/4 would be 18.5. The height would be 13 minus 1/4 and 1/4 would be 12.5. Click OK. And then we'll just select this box here. In fact, we can even go to our alignment options, which don't show up if you just have one thing selected. So you'd have to get the alignment panel, which if you don't have that out, you would go to Window and Align. And then what you have to do here is select what you want it to align to. So you go to Show Options, and then where it says Align To, you say Align to Artboard. And now that you just have that one item selected, you can go ahead and hit the center and the center vertical, and it places that right in the center for you. Gives you a pretty good idea of what you won't see. And then you can either, if that enhances your design to have a white border, fine. If it distracts from it, like in this case, you'd probably want to trim that off before you put that in your portfolio. And then of course, if you did something like this, you're going to have to change the color of this object. So you'd have to go into the layers, unlock all of them. And I'm doing that just by clicking on one and dragging across the other. Otherwise, to lock and unlock, you can just simply, do it manually one at a time. In this case, I would just select this object rather than worrying about finding the color. I could use the eyedropper tool, which a quick shortcut to find that, if it's not readily available out here, is just the I key, letter I, and then click on something that's the same color, and then we'll just click away, and you can see how that works. And then you just take your time bringing in all of your other images, make sure this thing is absolutely perfect, and then what you're going to do is, and probably should have been doing this all along, is File, Save As. And then I would save this in the same folder that all of the images that you created from Photoshop are in, and then take that, and this is important, take that whole entire folder with you. Whether you're working from library to class or home to class, it's that whole entire folder that you want that contains the Illustrator file and all of those images that are placed inside of here. And then when you're in class and you're ready to print, you want to take that whole folder, again, that contains your Illustrator file and all of the small versions of these images, bring that over to the computer in the classroom. In fact, I'd get out a piece of paper at this point and write these steps down so you're prepared to do this in class. So step number 1, have your whole entire folder on the flash drive, come over to the computer that are connected to the printers in the classroom, drag the folder onto the desktop of that computer, go ahead, open your Illustrator file, all of your images should open up and repopulate here. There's 2 things that you want to be sure about here. One is which artboard are you going to print, and you can always tell which artboard you're on by looking down here. If I click over here into this artboard, it tells me that that's artboard number 2, and in my case, clicking over here shows me that I'm on artboard number 5. So I'm going to remember that when I go into the print dialog box. The other thing is on these high-end inkjet printers, you definitely don't want to print in CMYK with them. Now that shouldn't be a problem for us because right from the very beginning we set this document up in RGB, but you may want to double check here. So we'll go File, we'll go to Color or Document Color Mode, and just make sure that that is in RGB. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to go File, Print. Now this is going to look different for you on the school printers. The choices will look different, but the menu is essentially the same. You're going to go to Printer, and from the drop down you're going to choose which printer you're printing to. You'll have 2 choices at the front of the classroom. You'll have the A printer, which will be a little bit closer to you, and the B printer, which is closer to the wall. Then you want to go to artboards, check range, and then put in the artboard number that you want to print. In my example, it's artboard number 5. Then you want to select the paper size. We're using 13 by 19, so that should be either Super A or Super A3. Sometimes it's Super B, but I believe on the printers that you're choosing it'll be Super A. The way that you make sure that you pick the right one, just pretend you picked the Super A3, is you then look here and see that the width and the height is very, very close to 13 by 19. You should be seeing in here that it's set to print the way you want it. If it's not, if something's messed up, like it's only showing part of it, like here, then click on these buttons until it shows you the right way, or first try auto rotate and just make sure that it has the right content, that it doesn't look like anything's going to be cut off on there. That's pretty much all you need to know on this general page that comes up. And if general didn't come up when you first opened it, I probably should have said that a couple seconds ago, but that's what you do, is you click here, make sure general shows up. The other thing that we do is we go to color management. We want the printer color handling to say let Illustrator determine the colors, and then the printer profile. This is where we would go through a list, and it's going to be a long list to where you'll have to evoke scrolling here. And you want to pick the paper that most closely describes what you're printing on. So most likely it will say Epson, and then like high quality gloss or something along those lines. Any part of this that you're not sure of, just yell over to me and I'll come and help you out. But I figure with these instructions you should be able to get pretty darn close. And then the last thing is, look here, make sure everything makes sense. Go back, look over here, again make sure that it's pointing to the right printer, that the artboards are set right, that the paper size is set right, that everything looks good in this preview, and then make sure the page is loaded up on the printer. Click print and you should be good.